Bomb. Out of the slump. Yep. So for a while, I've been in a reading slump. And the book I've been reading during that is Promise of Blood by McClellan. I won't dwell on it too much because that was the subject of my last video. But the reason I've been in a slump with this book is due to the fact that it didn't quite meet my expectation. Rather than that it's a bad book, because it's not. So, having battled my way through the book and out of the reading slump, here's my review of it. This is a fantasy set in a world that is going through an industrial revolution, but also has the presence of magic. There are 9 kingdoms, and each king has his royal cabal of sorcerers. And common among the populace are people known as the Nagged. Those who aren't sorcerers. They can't manipulate magical elements, but they have some sort of magical knack. For example, they might have the knack to remember every detail ever. That includes one of the main characters, Adamat. He's a ex-police investigator. And there's another character called Olin. His knack is that he doesn't need to sleep, making him a prime candidate to be a bodyguard, which is the job he has. There's also a knack that exhibits itself sometimes for manipulating the energy of gunpowder. And they've formed a group known as Powder Mages, their own sort of cabal of sorcerers, whose magic comes from gunpowder, rather than whatever powers magic. And a lot of what the Powder Mages is doing is based on guns. It's based on guns. Woo! Can't remember where I found these. Had them for about 100 years. Don't think they work anymore. But these Powder Mages are shooting their... Whoops. Maybe it was loaded. Bullet just fell out. Never mind. These Powder Mages are using their gunpowder-based weapons, shooting, directing bullets, maybe just directing energy of gunpowder directly. All quite an interesting concept that I quite could get behind. I kind of enjoyed that aspect of it. Now, the main plot revolves around a character called Tamas, who is leading a coup against one of the kings in his kingdom. Opening of the book is Tamas leading a bunch of Powder Mages to kill the king and all of his cabal of sorcerers. It's a revolution, and they follow it up by killing all of the aristocracy and stealing their land. Very, French of them. And as revolutions go, it all goes quite well. And this coup is led by Tamas, who's considered a bit of a tactical genius, as well as being the head of the Powder Mage cabal. And there's some other plots going on with some crazy sorcerers. I don't know. I don't want to throw in too many spoilers. The plot makes for a fairly exciting read. A good mix of backstory, world building, action, and some interesting characters. And despite being in a bit of a reading slump, and it taking me quite a while to get into the book, I did find myself enjoying reading it. I liked a lot of the characters, particularly Daniel. But when I got to the end of it, it left me pondering. And, I couldn't help thinking the book had a lot of issues. One of the things that put me into the reading slump was that the book opened with the character Adamat, a retired police investigator, being employed for a new investigation. That kind of made me feel like I've been tricked into reading a detective story. And I think that was unfair. It's not a detective story, it's a fantasy. And one aspect of it is told through the eyes of Adamat. I didn't like Adamat. He was boring. I guess he was used as a way of telling the other side of the story. Trying to give the reader clues into what was going on behind the scenes. But Adamat didn't really ever do anything worth mentioning. He didn't progress the plot in any way. If he hadn't been in the story at all, nothing would be different. He seemed a rather superfluous character that made the book probably about a third longer than it needed to be. And then there's the big question of who are the good guys? Now obviously this book is told painting Tamas as the good guy, leading a revolution against a king who overtaxes his people to pay for an overly lavish lifestyle, and his people are starving and dying and whatnot. So overtaxed, not looked after, let's kill him, and everyone else that is associated with him. A sound plan, probably. So Tamas does this quite effectively, but he's fully aware that in doing so, he is likely to plunge the country into a civil war of Republicans versus Royalists, and he's aware that should he prevail in that civil war, he's almost certain to face a war against a neighbouring nation, which is bigger, wealthier, and more powerful. So, it seems that Tamas has taken a country that is overtaxed but at peace, and has plunged it into a civil war, followed by a war against a more powerful nation that they're likely to lose against, and he'll probably have to raise taxes to pay for those wars. So I'm not really sure who he has benefited through these actions. And throughout the book, Tamas is hailed as a tactical genius, except for all that stuff I just said, he seems like a tactical idiot. Especially since, to perform this coup, he killed all of the country's sorcerers, who were a major military asset. So if they were likely to lose a war before, they're almost certain to lose a war now. A lot of questions about this book for me. So it had good points, but bad points. It's not a bad book, but it's not a good book. I guess I'd give it about 3 stars. Maybe less. Bye!